Well, do you think we're ready to get started? If folks could mute their lines, there's a little bit of background noise. I think it'll help facilitate everyone being able to hear. Good afternoon. My name's Julie Moore. I'm the Secretary of Natural Resources, and it's a real pleasure to be here with you this afternoon. We are going to provide an overview of the American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA, funding that's been made available to ANR. But part of the purpose for these Tell Me More listening sessions is also to be able to hear about any environmental concerns you may have. So after we finish these initial presentations, we will gladly take questions around the ARPA plan and the substance of what's presented, but also know that we would welcome your questions about any topic related to the environment that may be within the purview of the Agency of Natural Resources. For those of you unfamiliar with Teams, there is a chat function where you're also welcome to add your questions throughout the presentations. We will have staff monitoring those chats. And there's a bar at the top of the screen with a little bubble with some lines that I think are made to look like text. If you click on that, it'll open a separate column on your page, and you can type your questions in there. And as I say, we will keep track of that chat throughout this afternoon's presentation. So starting with ARPA funding, as you may know, nationally, the federal government appropriated about $1.9 trillion to the ARPA program to address the public health and economic crises caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. This includes money to invest in broadband, assistance for economically disadvantaged communities to help protect them from future crises, as well as the work that's particularly germane to the Agency of Natural Resources, which is to make critical investments in water and sewer infrastructure. Of that 1.9 trillion nationally, the state of Vermont will receive about $2.7 billion. More than half of that is actually directly appropriated to federal agencies, individuals, local governments, education institutions. But there's more than $1 billion that the state will be deploying between now and December 31st of 2024, when these dollars need to be committed to projects. The legislature and the administration during the last legislative session looked at ways to invest those ARPA funds and have generally agreed on 5 broad areas: broadband infrastructure, climate action, housing, economic development, and clean water. So again, bringing us back to the purpose of today. Within the FY22 budget, the legislature has allocated about $640 million of that total $1 billion in ARPA funds into these areas, including $100 million for clean water. In a moment, I'm going to turn it over to Neil Kamman, who will talk in more detail about those allocations. But just know about 50 million of that 100 is for use in the current fiscal year, FY22, with an additional $50 million explicit commitment over the next 2 years. And then there's also was a statement of intent in the state's FY22 budget that the total investment in water infrastructure of these ARPA funds will total nearly $200 million. So we are just in the early stages of the work necessary to stand up the programs and initiatives Neil is about to describe. Grateful for all of you for turning out today and look forward to the discussion that's sure to follow. So with that, I will turn it over to Neil.
Great. Thank you, Secretary Moore. Good afternoon, everybody. I do see some names and faces that I recognize. And so for those who can see me on the screen, it's nice to see you all here. I'm going to take a few minutes to walk through the program areas that Agency of Natural Resources has developed for these ARPA water and sewer dollars. The intent of them is to make some transformational investments in areas which don't typically see the opportunity for investments like this. And quickly, before I get started, so I'm the director of the Water Investment Division at the department, and our role is to coordinate funding for water infrastructure, clean water projects, wastewater, drinking water infrastructure projects through the State Revolving Loan Fund and the Clean Water Fund and these ARPA dollars. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you all and run through a few slides. It should take about 10 minutes. And please let me know. Maybe Elle, you can just let me know that you see that.
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay.
Currently, we see your icon.
All right.
It looks like it's coming, Neil. Now it's up.
Okay, great. Okay. So the imagery that you see behind the title here actually is right from the ARPA website on the Agency of Natural Resources, available right from the homepage. So you see there are 6 program areas I'm going to walk through, and in actually no particular order, but there's some great opportunities here to help Vermonters and make some truly transformational investments. And so I'm going to go ahead and get started by talking about the Healthy Homes Initiative. So here in this initiative, we're endeavoring to support manufactured home communities who have infrastructure needs. And we're endeavoring to support Vermonters who rely on on-site and residential wastewater and drinking water wells. And so this is an initiative that would provide grants for projects for clean and adequate drinking water and wastewater, stormwater and drainage systems for low-income Vermonters and people that need assistance. There are 2 categories in the Healthy Homes. The first is for manufactured home communities. We will shortly be making available through a request for proposal grants to help mobile home communities, largely cooperatively and owner-owned MHPs, to do needs assessments. Hope to support 15 to 20 needs assessments with state fiscal $22, maybe about $75,000 per assessment. And that'll set the stage for providing construction grants. Right now, we're envisioning grants of about $1.5 million and anticipating supporting 3 to 7 of those in any given year. We'll be developing the request for proposals to get that out in late 2021. You're going to hear me say this a number of times. And part of the delay in that, if you will, just has to do with getting staffing on board and adequate to really implement these programs to help Vermonters do this work. The first appropriation that the legislature provided for this program is $3.25 million. That's available to us now, pending the outcome of the RFPs. And I do want to communicate that this seems like a drop in the bucket for the amount of need, and I recognize that there may be some folks from community trusts on that line who know that there's a much larger need than this. And so know that we're also coordinating with the federal delegation for additional flexibility and additional funding that might be available through the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. The second of the initiatives in Healthy Homes is for on-site, and this is for people who do not have the means and who need to update and replace their septic systems to meet current guidelines and for septic systems that are failing. This program complements a loan program that the Department of Environmental Conservation administers, and is designed to help those that are in need based on income, and is scaled so that awards would be made for folks of the highest level of need, and then smaller awards for those who may be able to access financing, but for whom borrowing the entire amount to upgrade their system would be cost prohibitive. And then I do also want to communicate that we're designing this program to help with multi-occupancy units that are occupied by their owners, because that's an area of need. There's a $1 million appropriation for FY22 here. We'll be issuing our programs during fall of 2021 and coordinating with League of Cities and Towns, RPCs, community lenders, and organizations to disseminate this information to eligible homeowners. So pivoting away from Healthy Homes, we're going to get into the area of wastewater treatment at this point. We've developed an initiative called the Pretreatment Initiative, and the goal of that is to assist municipalities to provide waste treatment capacity to allow businesses in those communities to access that capacity to meet their needs and to regrow after the impacts of the COVID pandemic. One of the, in growth industries in Vermont typically have some high strength waste, which means wastewater that takes a lot more for the wastewater treatment plant to process. And we are developing a program here that will reach out not only to municipalities that serve businesses, but also to businesses that are trying to access capacity from municipalities to support this initiative. We're going to start this with a request for information, not quite an RFP yet. And the reason for that is we don't know what we don't know. And we do want some robust input on the opportunities that this particular appropriation presents for municipalities and their businesses. So that request for information RFI is being drafted. As we speak, we intend to get it out during this month, and the responses will inform development of a subsequent RFP to which municipalities will be able to apply in partnership with businesses. Moving forward into another area of wastewater, this is a very exciting program, the Village Water and Sewer Initiative. In Vermont, there are 200 villages, and many of them lack adequate access to community scale water or wastewater, and many small villages just rely on a collection of septic systems and a collection of individual wells. And that's a real limitation on the ability of those villages to grow. These are not inexpensive projects and typically rely on putting together multiple, what we call stacks of funding from multiple funders. So for example, USDA Rural Development or the State Revolving Loan Fund, federal funds, and Northern Border Regional Commission, a variety of grant sources. And so the intent here is to ice the cake on those developing projects so that we can bring the projects to fruition in reality while ensuring that user rates remain reasonable. And that's really the driving factor for the size of grant. So we intend for these awards to be, if you will, the last in order to make these projects work. We've got about 35 communities that have completed an initial evaluation of community scale systems, and we intend to be working with those. We'll be bringing in applications through a request into our intended use planning process. That's the process by which we stage projects for State Revolving Loan Fund. And the reason we're going to do that is just it's expeditious for the applicant, it's expeditious for the state. And there's an $8 million appropriation into this category for this year. And we expect there to be a robust and healthy demand. The next one is the Sewer Overflow Initiative. So it's no secret that there are many municipalities, not a tremendous number, but there are municipalities that are still fighting with combined sewer overflow or sanitary sewer overflow problems just based on the design of the plumbing in their municipalities and how that plumbing interacts with stormwater and delivers wastewater to the treatment plant. All the communities in the state that have these issues are establishing or have established long-term compliance plans and schedules. And we've got more than $60 million of project need identified. Many municipalities are actually in the process of designing solutions and have been engaged with the State Revolving Loan Fund or USDA on funding these projects. So we will be bringing in applications through the existing State Revolving Loan process, the intended use plan and the project priority list, which I mentioned with respect to village wastewater. The idea here is that we will endeavor to identify 100% grant opportunity to offset some of those CSO costs. And we will rank those using the Municipal Pollution Control Priority System, which is the rules which have been established to prioritize grant funding. We have $10 million available for FY22 and fully expect there to be additional demand identified. The last major initiative that I want to mention to you is for 3 acre stormwater. So as part of the Lake Champlain and Memphremagog total maximum daily load phosphorus control plans, there is a requirement for private property owners and municipal and school property owners who own 3 or more acres of impervious land, that's land like you see in the image here where stormwater runoff runs off without infiltrating, that those sites undergo an engineering analysis and identify the best feasible fix to treat the stormwater as closely as possible to modern treatment standards. This is going to be a very expensive program for the state of Vermont, a projected $260 million need over the life of that. And so the governor has proposed a very substantial proposal to the legislature for this. For FY22, we have $5.5 million available, and as I'll explain in my next slide, that's supplemented with additional monies, ARPA dollars that the Clean Water Board has authority to appropriate. And our approach is going to be twofold here. In the first approach, we'll be hiring engineering firms to provide site assessment and design and permitting, and ultimately, hopefully, construction management services for property owners. That'll be paid for by this program, and property owners will be able to access the program through the state. We're also providing enhanced support for a Green Schools initiative, which is a standalone initiative that allows schools to obtain funding support from the state in order to comply with these requirements as well. So we'll be looking to issue an RFP in the fall of this year for engineering services contracts, and then follow that, and likewise request for proposals to design and construct what are known as public-private partnership projects. So projects that municipalities are partnering with private entities in order to get more stormwater treatment that could be achieved by either one project or the other. And lastly, I also want to mention that the legislature appropriated $10 million a year for the next 3 fiscal years, so fiscal 22, 3, and 4, and directed that the Clean Water Board appropriate these dollars. And so the Clean Water Board has done that work for year 1 and are directing $3.5 million through the Agency of Agriculture to support water quality grants to farmers and partners. As I noted in the last slide, $3.5 million to support 3-acre stormwater. And the Clean Water Board also is enhancing municipal pollution control grants, which are the grants that allow municipalities that are upgrading their waste treatment facilities to offset some of those costs with grants. So those are the programs. That's a lot of information, but it's all also summarized here on our website, which you can see the link to right here. Each of these tiles, if you click that tile, will give you more information about the program. And will also give you the opportunity to signal your interest in accessing that program area by filling out a really simple form, just letting us know who you are, a little bit about your project. And what this will do will be to allow folks who fill that form out to have their interest signaled, and for our staff who are managing these programs to then be able to contact you as those RFIs and RFPs are all built and ready to roll. So I'm going to stop there and stop sharing my screen, and I will turn it back over to you, Secretary Moore.
Thanks, Neil. Next up, I'm going to ask Billy Koster, who's the agency's Director of Plant Policy and Planning, to just provide a brief overview of changes we are making to our management of the permitting requirements around ARPA-related projects and support we will be providing to potential applicants.
Thanks, Julie, and thanks everyone for being here. My name is Billy Koster. I'm the Director of Policy and Planning for the agency, and the Secretary has asked me and my team to help stand up a process within the agency to both track and manage the permitting of ARPA-funded projects across our various regulatory and permitting programs, with the goal of identifying and resolving any issues with those permitting processes as early as possible so that we can expedite the review, understanding that there's a high volume of development that is going to be supported with ARPA funds. There's limited permitting and engineering resources in the state to move those projects forward, and there is ultimately deadlines associated with the use of those funds. We want to find as much efficiency as we can within the process. This work begins with the development of outreach and information materials targeted to sectors we anticipate accessing ARPA funds. We're in the process of meeting with key sectors and beginning to develop sector-specific technical assistance and guide materials that identify critical path permits and best practices to navigate the permitting systems most efficiently and successfully. We're also building internal systems within the agency to track ARPA-funded projects through the permitting process and practices within our programs to identify and elevate issues and conflicts as they may arise through our process so that we can resolve them as quickly as possible. That work is underway, and I likely will be reaching out to many of you over the course of the next weeks and months to get your feedback on how we can be most helpful, but certainly would encourage anyone to ask questions and share suggestions today in ways where this sort of enhanced permit support and management would be most useful in achieving your goals with ARPA funds. So thank you.
Thanks, Billy. We're now going to work on the questions that have come into the chat function, and then a few minutes on, we'll also make sure that anyone who's called in, so I know it would not be possible for you to provide a question in the chat, has an opportunity to ask as well. The first question, Neil, I believe likely goes to you, and it's a question about whether industries who are in municipalities with qualifying local pretreatment programs be able to be permitted through the local program versus DEC. I don't know if that actually falls directly in your shop or would be something we might be better suited to follow up with offline with someone from watershed management.
So I would say yes to that, Secretary Moore, that I think that question is best passed over to Amy Palachik, manager of the Wastewater Management Program, whom, Megan, I know you know. So this, what I was talking about is really the financing program as opposed to the permitting side of the program.
Great. Okay, we can help Megan follow up and make sure that question gets to Amy.
I think I just didn't want you to craft your program such that you had to get a permit through DEC, because that was what the slide said. I just wanted it to be considered as you develop the program that there could be other mechanisms to ensure O&M.
And Megan, if I could say, that'd be a great, that kind of feedback is exactly what we're after in the request for information. So any feedback that you want to offer along those lines is going to be very helpful.
Next, Neil, there are several questions related to the intended use plan. The first is whether or not we intend to do an amended IUP. But then there is also a question about the relationship to the WHISPER program, since this work will be affiliated with our state revolving loan fund programs, and specifically if the sewer overflow initiative will provide access to WHISPER, but I assume that there may be others with interest in as to whether the village water and sewer initiative would.
That's a very good question. So firstly, on the intended use plan, yes, we absolutely intend to reopen the intended use plan to allow municipalities who want access to one of these programs to apply. Yes. With respect to WHISPER, that's a very nuanced question and a very interesting one. And the way I'm going to answer that now is to say that very likely that those programs that are accessing the CSO funding are already going to be part of the SRF and borrowing SRF dollars. And so certainly the WHISPER portion of the overall project package would be available to sponsor. We had not contemplated sponsoring with the ARPA dollars, and there are some consequences to doing so in terms of the longevity of our ability to fund WHISPER in the manner we've envisioned.
So I think more to come, but thank you for raising that question. Next, there's a question about whether the 3-acre rule applies to the Connecticut River watershed or only the Champlain and Memphremagog basins. Currently, that rule applies only to the Champlain and Memphremagog basins. The requirements around 3-acre stormwater treatment in the Connecticut River basin, as well as the Hudson-Hoosick River basin in southwest Vermont, won't take effect until 2033. So our focus and these ARPA dollars currently are targeted towards the Lake Champlain and Lake Memphremagog watersheds where those requirements are already in effect. The next question was, I wish I had noted what exactly, Neil, you were talking about when it was entered, but Gary Fox, maybe you can clarify. You asked, can this be business or municipal property owners? Which initiative was that question specific to?
I think that was for 3 acres.
Sure. So it was during the stormwater, the stormwater section, and we have multiple properties that are contributing to a ravine washing away the stormwater treatment management aspects of the of a particular business property, encroaching on the building, endangering the foundation of a large manufacturing facility.
So yes, the 3 acre grants are intended to be broadly available to all of the identified 3 acre parcel owners within the Champlain and Memphremagog watershed, both public and private. The next question was about,
this is not on the, sorry.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so this is in the Connecticut River watershed. It's not up by like Memphremagog or Champlain.
So there are other funding mechanisms other than ARPA dollars that may be better suited to projects outside of the Champlain and Memphremagog watershed. The initiative itself is really targeting implementation of the 3 acre stormwater permit, but through the Clean Water Fund administered by the agency, there are oftentimes opportunities to address what we would refer to as non-regulatory stormwater needs. And can certainly have someone follow up with you on that.
Thank you.
The next question is about deadlines for utilizing this funding. So the overall deadline is by the end of calendar year 2024, so December 31st, 2024, the ARPA dollars all need to be encumbered. It means they need to be in some sort of grant or contract agreement for use. They don't actually have to be fully expended until the end of calendar year 2026. So there is time to do work beyond kind of the very finite timeframe provided for ARPA, but it is still rather limited, and we know that that's a challenging factor. The next question I see is related to the Village Water and Wastewater Initiative. It was mentioned that there are 35 communities that have provided information. And the question, Neil, is does this mean that other municipalities that did not provide feedback are at the back of the queue?
It does not. It does take a long time to develop a project like this out. There's a fairly long planning horizon to it. But that does not preclude somebody from coming in and engaging with us, and we'll be able to provide guidance as to how best to do that.
Great. The next question is around entities that may already be pursuing compliance with the 3 acre permit, having hired an engineering consultant, and will they need to use the state hired consultants in order to access the grant funding for implementation?
That is a good question, the answer to which we have not considered yet.
So
it's more, I would say more to follow on that one.
Yeah, and I think maybe it's a great point to pause and just remind folks that we've received initial word of this enormous funding opportunity only about 6 months ago. The legislature completed their work in funding these initiatives about 3 months ago, and so we really are in the throes of standing up each of these programs. To the extent we don't have specific answers to your questions today, it just reflects that these are a work in progress. But please know that this kind of feedback and question is really important in helping us ensure that the programs that are ultimately put out on the street in the RFPs, Neil mentioned that would be coming later this year, are as robust and clear as possible. So thank you, and please keep those questions coming. The next question is whether ARPA dollars can be used to pay back existing loans. Unfortunately, paying off existing debt is an explicit prohibition in the way the ARPA funds were given to the state from Congress. The next question is, how might permitted, innovative, or alternative approaches to wastewater management, like a community scale urine diversion project, fit into one of these program areas? Neil, do you have any thoughts in that space?
I'm not well qualified to speak about IA systems, but I would say that a system that's designed to increase the capacity of an existing system by reducing the load on that system is the kind of thing that would certainly be considered in the program.
Great. The next question is about 3-acre sites, and is there going to be a funding mechanism that will not require either a municipal or DEC partnership? And I think we answered that in part, and again, this is an area of where additional clarity in our own thinking will be forthcoming.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, the idea, the motivation being there are some larger campus style projects, ski area projects where folks are in various stages of master planning and sort of a even decades long water quality planning that may warrant being able to use certain folks. Thank you.
Thank you.
Julie, if I could just add a little bit on this topic in case this one comes up again, and recognizing some of the folks on the line. One of the things that we haven't yet done and intend to is to do a little bit of outreach around our ideas for how to structure this program, and would look forward to speaking to some key folks about that. So,
thanks, Neil. There's a comment about the affordability criteria that Neil had shared, which is this target user rate of $1,000 per year, and some feedback on that. Thank you, Seth. We will take that into consideration. Let's see. The next question on the list is how the Clean Water Board appropriation of pollution control grants will actually work. Neil, I think that's you too.
I'm looking for, I don't see that question in the chat. So I'm going to ask you, Julie, to reread it for me.
It said, how exactly will the Clean Water Board $3 million appropriation to the pollution control grant work?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, thank you, Brian. I see it now. That will be essentially adding dollars to the available headroom for PC grants within the current year's priority list. So for projects that are at the top of that list, we'll be able to drive that funding line further down.
The next question is about income guidelines for the Healthy Homes Initiative and other qualifying criteria. If you could speak to that a little bit more, Neil.
We don't know what those are specifically yet. So in state revolving loan fund world, manufactured home parks are kind of categorically identified as disadvantaged communities. So we have the opportunity to work directly in that space. We are contemplating and need to do some, a little bit more fact finding around it, to go with a 200% MHI top cap for folks who would receive assistance, because that's the cap at which our on-site loan funding program currently in statute exists. We're also considering a second tier for folks that are considered, at need based on AHS criteria, weatherization criteria, which would provide additional grant subsidy and a slightly different mechanism for those folks who may not be able to forward fund a project at all. And I'm going to stop looking at the chat and just listen to you, Julie, so I don't get hung up.
Gail Mann, I see you have your hand raised. You'll have to unmute yourself, Gail. All right, I see you put your hand down. So we'll go back to questions in the chat. The next question is about sort of looking at the future deployments of these ARPA funds, and will there be an opportunity to cover all geographies of the state for water quality and management? And I assume this question may be specific to the stormwater program, because that is the only one of the initiatives Neil described that I believe is geographically limited, other than the sewer overflow investments really being driven by those communities with sewer overflows. I think, maybe taking a step back, we know that there is literally in the next 10 years, more than $2 billion in water infrastructure related needs in the state of Vermont. So while $200 million through ARPA is an incredible opportunity to help accelerate important investments in this space, it is certainly far from meeting the total need related to drinking water, wastewater, stormwater, and dam safety improvements. And so as a result, we have had to be sort of thoughtful in selecting a handful of initiatives, working with the governor and in consideration of the priorities of the administration, and then working with the legislature and the priorities they also brought to bear in this space. We arrived at these 6 initiatives. So we will be continuing to look at, in particular, the uptake in demand and quality of projects that are being brought forward in each of these areas, potentially proposing recommendations. But it's really hard to say beyond that how that any changes in the dollars, the deployment of these dollars in out years at this point in time. Let's see. The next question is there any way to sort of create sustained funding? And I assume this means using these ARPA dollars, and I assume this means looking at revolving loan fund programs or other types of opportunities. And then it also asks with thinking about outdoor recreation, whitewater development, ski or golf resort usage. These the sort of one of the tenets of these ARPA dollars is that they need to go out as grants broadly, and there's a little bit of flexibility in there to make sure that we are maximizing their impact and not impinging on other funding sources communities may have already obtained. But they also need to be consistent with the types of projects and programs that are generally eligible under the state revolving fund program. So there are opportunities to be creative. I'm not sure they extend quite as far as into some of the VROREC type opportunities, the outdoor recreation opportunities mentioned in the chat, but that's certainly something we can look further into. There's a question, Neil, about maximum per project, and I know that varies a little bit and is still something we're working on, but maybe you'd like to speak to that in terms of funding in broad strokes.
In broad strokes, it would be easy to spend an entire annual appropriation on one project in one municipality in the space of combined sewer overflow, for example, or village wastewater. So yes, we do intend to create maximums. And I did mention in the context of one of the programs, but it's really applicable to a lot, is, part of what our division does is to try and help assemble funding strategies and financing strategies. And so ARPA isn't the last in all cases in our minds, but it's part of a larger financing strategy is what we're thinking.
Great. So the next question is around the pretreatment initiative, and it says for the private industries that can apply for funding on their wastewater pretreatment programs, will landfill owners or operators be eligible for these funds? And maybe more broadly, what types of industries would be eligible for those pretreatment funds?
Would you like me to take that? Okay. That is pretty much exactly why the root of the question is why we would like to get some more information through the request for information that we will be putting out shortly. I can't comment specifically on landfill leachate above and beyond any other prospective sending effluent stream, but please do, provide your information and questions to that RFI as it comes forward.
Yes, and so I think, maybe taking a step back even further, pretreatment is really intended to address high strength or toxic waste. So the types of waste streams that would potentially be eligible for this money would include dairy processing and meat processing, breweries and distilleries. We know that these industries can pose challenges oftentimes for the receiving municipal wastewater facility because of the organic strength of the waste, as well as toxics associated with things like landfill leachate. And this is an area where we really do need to grow our understanding, as Neil said, and encourage anyone with an interest in this space to consider completing that request for information that will be released in short order. The next question is about when there will be more clarity on the rules for the 3-acre stormwater, that there's some concern that it seems unclear. I can start by just framing it to say this is a regulatory program that was put into place at the end of last calendar year, so less than a year ago right now. We're continuing to work through the mechanics of helping landowners come into compliance with the permit. And as we've indicated several times, we are still building out these funding programs, but know that there will be an opportunity for property owners to access engineering services through the agency, as well as ultimately grant funds to support implementation. The next question is a workforce question, and it is a good one. Are there enough civil engineers in the state to do the design work that will be required to support the full implementation of these dollars? We sure hope so. As a civil engineer myself by training, I know that the engineering consulting services area is going to be tight, and this is an incredible amount of money to push through that system in a fairly short period of time. If we take a slightly broader view, we also know that Congress is working on a reauthorization of the FAST Act, which is the national level transportation funding, which could also see significant new and additional resources coming to Vermont for transportation related projects, which would also draw on the services of those same civil engineering contractors. So it's something we're aware of, we're sensitive to, and are looking for ways as best we can to spread these dollars out over time with the very real constraints that came with these ARPA funds. Let's see, another person commented on affordability and making sure that our water and sewer grant program is structured in a way that really supports compact development in Vermont's village centers and downtowns. And we agree that that kind of core infrastructure is foundational to the kinds of land use patterns we really want to promote here in Vermont. So thank you very much, Taylor, for weighing in. The next question was whether applying for any of these water-related initiatives prevent an organization from applying for or receiving funding through other initiatives managed by other state agencies. And the answer at the highest level is no, that we are actively seeking areas where these funds can be complementary to one another, whether it's a broadband project, a housing project, a transportation related project. We would like to see these dollars amplify use in communities to the extent possible. And to that same point, every municipality in the state has received an allocation of ARPA funds. And we're hopeful that a number of municipalities may also choose to invest their ARPA dollars in this same water infrastructure space, again, amplifying the impact. The next question is about if we have a sense for how many jobs that will be happening in the state utilizing some of these funds, and when we believe the first rounds of these jobs will be shovel ready. Neil, has your team penciled through yet when you see these first projects sort of getting underway?
I think that some of the projects that are on deck are projects that are live wires, and we are hopeful that we could see yellow machines next construction season, like calendar 22, with some of the dollars that we're talking about with state fiscal 22 appropriations.
Great. The next question is, have we compiled a list yet of state preferred engineers, or is that something that will be under development? I assume this may be relative to the 3-acre stormwater program.
So the manner in which we will do that will be to do a request for proposals and solicit for, we're considering, and again, I want to get some input from prospective parties about this, but looking to create master service contracts with engineering services firms, so that essentially the state is interacting with the engineering firm and the client is interacting with the engineering firm. That's the design.
I was also looking for, do you have preferred engineers for wastewater and water projects?
I see. Thank you. I can't answer that question myself as to whether the program that does the on-site well and wastewater permitting does maintain a preferred list. Julie, maybe you know this. And if not, we can certainly get the answer.
Yeah, I don't know either, Neil, but we would be happy to get the answer and follow up.
I will say that, designers are licensed. And so if you're a licensed designer, you're licensed to practice in the state of Vermont and interact with the permitting program. So that's, one means of preference.
Thank you.
If anybody from the state programs is on the line and wants to shoot me a side chat, and then I can provide the answer.
Okay, it looks like we have just a couple more questions in the chat, and then we'll open it up to folks who may either want to raise their hand or just announce a question if you're calling in from the phone. There's a question about whether wells contaminated by PFAS will be eligible for the Healthy Homes Initiative. Neil, have we gotten to that level of detail yet?
We have not. However, I don't see why it would not, because the design of the program is to help people who have either, failing septics or failing wells. So that is certainly something that we can be thinking about. That's tricky because if the well is contaminated and you've got a small parcel, there's not a lot of space you can go.
The next question is about the dam safety initiative. And let's see, it says specifically what you may prioritize with any application of ARPA funds relative to dam safety. We are still waiting, and I think this is an important sort of asterisk on the dam safety initiative for approval from U.S. Treasury to spend ARPA dollars on dam safety. To my mind, it's a no-brainer that dams would be considered water infrastructure, but it's something that we've asked for additional clarity around. The work that will take place during the current fiscal year on state-owned dams is actually being funded with some one-time general fund monies. This is a critical infrastructure need and one we knew we needed to get underway. We are optimistic that Treasury will agree and there will be an opportunity to buttress the investment of one-time state monies with ARPA fund dollars in out years of the program. And then the last question I'm going to take before we open it up to folks who may want to verbalize a question is whether these funds are actually able to be used as match with other federal grant programs such as FEMA. It is our understanding that these ARPA dollars sort of maintain their reputation as federal funds and therefore cannot, at least the state dollars cannot be used as match for federal funds. I'm less certain if that string attaches to the funds delivered to municipalities, and would encourage you to follow up with the League of Cities and Towns on that particular matter. Is there anyone who either has been unable to access the chat or is on the phone and would like to ask a question?
I would like to ask a question.
Please, go ahead.
Calling from Colchester, Vermont, Westbury Mobile Home Park. We're 250 homes in this park. Some homes are attached to leach fields. Some have their own separate septic system. We have a continuous problem with both. When can we expect funding? And do we need an engineer?
You want me to take that, Julie? Yeah, so thank you, sir. That situation sounds like the exact kind of situation that knowing more, we can create some means to be of help. And so we'll be looking to put a request for proposals out that would allow folks to come in and apply for assessment services so that engineers can go out and take a look at your property, see what the needs are, see what the optimal solutions are, and then certainly help assemble that funding stack, as I noted, which, the mobile home, manufactured home program would definitely be part of. So the first step, if the engineering solutions are not known, the first step is the engineering assessment, and that will be coming soon.
No, thank you very much.
Sorry, I neglected to unmute myself. Not a great Teams meeting without someone doing that.
Julie, we have
yes.
a question here in the room.
Great, please.
Hi, this is Tom Kennedy from Onascutney Regional Commission. Many municipalities are using, whether municipal and county funds, are wondering what the flexibility is as far as using the Clean Water Fund guidelines as far as their stormwater. And like, one of the things they're wondering about under maybe resiliency is whether they can do anything with culvert upgrades related to stormwater.
I can take that, Julie, if you want.
Please.
Hi, Tom. Nice to see you. I should have just come to National Life today.
I was hoping you were going to be here.
Yeah. So the basic eligibility guideline for ARPA funding from the Treasury under the water and sewer category is if it's eligible for the state revolving loan fund or drinking water revolving loan fund, clean water, drinking water, it's ARPA eligible as water infrastructure. And so to the degree that a municipality has need to replace culverts in order to reduce erosivity and improve water quality and habitat, that is definitely an eligible use. And I think the league is assembling a pretty nice FAQ about this already, and I know Katie Buckley is on the line, so she can possibly point to that in the chat.
Can I ask one other question that's different from this? I am working with a mobile home park, and they are starting the process applying for funds through your water and wastewater program. Can they, it seems as though your program may be better as far as there's no match required. Would they have to start all over in their process, or can they just follow the guidelines that they're presently using and then somehow transition over to try to apply for some of these ARPA funds?
To the degree that they have followed a path where they're kind of like aiming towards USDA funding or aiming towards revolving loan fund funding, I would say their assessment work would be just fine, Tom. And I think a good way to handle that would be on their behalf or letting them know to fill out the interest form that I mentioned for that specific program so that we can capture their identity and reach out when we're ready to reach out with some additional information. There's an opportunity for a description in there and everything, and so particularities about the project that are specific like that as you chance there.
Yeah, and just a reminder for all those expressions of interest we've heard and I've seen roll by in the chat. So Amy has posted the website back into the chat. If you click on that and then pick the initiative you're interested in, there is a link that would allow you to register, so to speak. Provide us with basic contact information, and we will add you to the mailing list for all future announcements relative to that initiative. Those mailing lists are initiative specific, so if you happen to be interested in both the stormwater initiative and the mobile home park initiative, please complete what will feel like a somewhat similar form on both of those pages. But it's helping us from an administrative perspective make sure that we get the right information to the right people without drowning others in additional information. I see TC, you have your hand raised.
Can you hear me now?
We can. Go ahead.
Thank you. Well, thanks for doing this. This is very helpful and interesting. I'm my wife and I are property owners, but my comment has to do with what we are doing or need to do. It's not necessarily an ARPA funding question around the tricky issue of individual property owners and the use of chemicals, pesticides, and other things on property, especially as it may impact the water quality around ponds and lakes and streams and so on. Specifically, what brought this to my attention is we were out in Colchester Point not long ago. And as you know, there's a lot of development there. A lot of old camps now are being transitioned into year-round homes. There's a lot more acreage in terms of lawns and that sort of thing. Many of those lawns and so on are tilted down towards the lake. And it happened to be raining, and we were leaving, and there were Chemlon trucks spraying chemicals on lawns when it was raining, and it was going, obviously, washing into the lake eventually. I did call the town of Colchester management administration, and they indicated that there was nothing in their regulations necessarily that impacted this. And I also called the state as well to get information, and the state indicated it was more of a town issue. So this is obviously a much smaller issue as it relates to millions of dollars of funding, but it does seem to obviously have a significant impact in terms of water quality.
You're muted, Julie.
Twice. TC, I wanted to thank you for flagging that concern. If you're comfortable and wanted to drop your email in the chat, I'd be happy to have someone from here follow up with you offline. And if not, encourage you to reach out after the meeting, but duly noted and thank you. There are a couple more questions in the chat, and recognizing time is short, we'll take just two of them. The next one is whether the village water and sewer initiative is only for villages that do not have community scale systems now to build new, or is the funding eligible to support replacement and upgrades to existing systems? Neil, do you want to take that?
Sure. So the design of the program is really to improve the capacity to allow a village to be all that it could be, and not necessarily to rebuild or replace systems that simply need maintenance, even though that's a huge need. And I'm gonna, Julie, with your leave, I'm gonna use this as an opportunity to pivot to another large funding initiative that may be coming down the pike. So in the political sphere, we hear a lot about the Infrastructure Act. And Julie mentioned sort of a component of that has moved off separately around transportation. But the Infrastructure Act has some tremendous opportunities for Vermont. And if it passes, will provide a very large amount of funding into the state revolving loan fund in a manner that is much more affordable for the state to be able to draw down the federal dollars, and in a manner that allows the state to subsidize those dollars at a minimum of 50% or 49%. So I recognize that for some folks on the line, I know who you are, and I know some of the projects you're interested in, like you're not finding a lot of love or satisfaction in what you've seen today. But what's coming behind on the Infrastructure Act could be, exponentially transformative on top of ARPA. So, feel free if you feel like you want to advocate for that piece of legislation to make it through. Yeah.
And then there are two more quick questions. One is if we have any sense about job creation associated with these ARPA dollars. And I think it's too early to say. That said, the Agency of Commerce and Community Development is working on an economic impact analysis tool to deploy specifically around their projects. But the intention would be to try to use it to estimate the impact of some of this work. So more to come, but I think that's still several months out from now. And then I did see a question about helping farmers with nutrient management plans and whether this funding is available. As Neil indicated in his opening remarks, there is $10 million of ARPA funds that has been appropriated by the legislature for use by the Clean Water Board. The Clean Water Board has, and I should say it's $10 million a year for each of the next 3 years. The Clean Water Board has allocated initially about a third of that funding to support the construction of agricultural best management practices. To my knowledge, nutrient management plans are not an eligible activity relative to the constraints of the federal funds, but there is an opportunity there to do infrastructure projects on farms with some of these ARPA dollars. And as one last reminder, as we close out today, Elle has pasted in the chat once again that link to the webpage where you can find additional information. This is also a place where we will continue to add information. So please bookmark it and check back. I just want to thank you for turning out today. This has been one of our best attended Tell Me Mores. It's obvious there's a lot of interest in this space. And there is a lot of work taking place inside the agency. We're a bit like a whole flock of ducks right now, madly paddling under the water, and look forward to continuing to share information with all of you in the days and weeks ahead. Encourage you to reach out with questions as you have them. Neil, Billy, and I all stand ready to help answer questions or direct them to the people that can. And again, my thanks for turning out this afternoon. Be well, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.